Greetings Zombie Slayers! Today we're going to have a further look at some basic modding in 7 Days to Die. While the vanilla game is great, there are a lot of opportunities to tweak and fine-tune your game beyond the just basic game settings. You can add new items, armor, zombies, quests, recipes and what have you. Some mods, or mod packs like Valmod, War of the Walkers and so on, have larger installs and are more complicated, but you don't need them to start making changes to your game, both to tweak the challenge and how fun it is. But it also gives you an opportunity to begin learning how things work under the hood. So for today, we're going to take a look at modded beasts, with special thanks to Jerva for the tip and information. So let's have a look here. We've got a few of them roaming around, nicely radiated, and even some cool glowing ones walking around in the distance here. At night, now they look particularly fearsome and beautiful, at the distance of course. You wouldn't want to run into these at night outside of your base. On the other hand, visually they do stand out, so at least it's easier to spot them from a distance, as long as they're not coming up behind you, that is. You can also, if I turn on the night vision goggles, well, you can't really see them, but there are actually some normal zombie dogs, and there's like one there that are out there, but you don't really see them at night because they blend in with the background very easily. So definitely the radiated ones that I've put in here are definitely nicer. So adding them must be a lot of work and effort, right? Not really. Looks can be deceiving. In this case, it's deceptively easy to add them. So let's pause here and look at how we accomplish it. Alright, we're now back in Windows, though similar works for the other platforms, just the locations might differ. We first need to locate the necessary files, and these are in a configuration directory. What we do is we right click on your game and you hit properties. You then go to local files and browse local files. We go into the data and the config directory, and this is where you have all the configurations that apply to the game. Let's first look at entityclasses.xml. A couple of things to be aware of when modifying files. Firstly, if you make a mistake, the game might fail to load. This, however, is not as serious as it might seem. If you go back to the main Steam window, you see that says verify integrity of game files. If you hit that one, the game or Steam will go and verify that all these files are the original ones, and the ones that are not, it will basically overwrite with whatever is on the server. So then you get back a sort of a pristine working condition. Of course, when you do that, you lose the changes of anything you've done. So what I do instead is that I create a copy of the entityclasses.xml and just rename it as org for original. And if I mess up the normal file, I can just overwrite it instead of verifying all of it. You can do whichever one you want. So let's open up the file, and I use Notepad++. So let's start here. So I put all my stuff at the bottom of the file. And the reason is that in the modding we're doing today, we're actually extending some existing animals. And those classes being extended need to have been loaded higher up in the file, else the game will have a problem linking everything up. If you do new things from scratch that don't extend other classes, you don't necessarily have to put them at the bottom. But it's easy enough just to group all your changes at the bottom so you can find them easily. So what does it mean to extend? Well, let's have a look here at the first beast. It's an animal radiated direwolf. The name is unique, which doesn't exist until I put it in, because every name or every class has to have a unique name. So that's just what I typed in. I could type in whatever I want to. But it says it extends animal direwolf. And that means that it has all the base values and base properties of the animal direwolf. So this is useful because it means that we only need to put in properties of things we want to change or things we're adding. So if I go check on the direwolf, let's do a couple of checks here. We'll see that the animal direwolf by itself also extends animal wolf. But it has, different ragdoll, it looks different health, etc., etc. So there's a lot of changes from the normal animal wolf just for the animal direwolf. What we do when we extend animal direwolf is we get everything here and we get everything that is in animal wolf, and then we just make changes. So let's go back to our direwolf that we have here and continue. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put in a max health of 1k. So it's more than the standard ones because it's tougher. We're all going to bump the experience because obviously it's tougher, so it should give you more experience when you kill. The next two things are the more interesting ones. We have a particle on spawn, which is a radiated particle on mesh. And that's the one that gives that the particle, yellow particle glow that is appearing around radiated ones. And where do we get that one from? Well, let's go check at the white. The white has a number of these other things, and let's make sure we get the correct one. And if you look here, it also has this property. So this is what gives the white, the feral radiated white, that particle cloud around it. And let's go back to the Direwolf and get the correct one, and you'll see we're using exactly the same thing. We're also applying a buff, and in this case we're doing the zombie radiated buff 40. That's the lesser heal, so it'll heal 40 health points over 3 seconds. There's also a buff 80, but that may be a little bit too tough and a little bit overpowered, so we're not going to use that one. You could if you want to, that's really up to you. After this, we play around with a little bit of the values of what you get when you harvest it, because presumably it's a little bit tougher, maybe a little bit bigger, so you get a little bit more when you harvest it. And that's it for the animal radiated direwolf. Now we'll go to the radiated zombie, and we follow a pretty much the same process of doing that. We extend the animal zombie dog to get all the base properties. We bump the health points, we bump the experience gain, and we put on the particle effect as well. And we also put in the radiated 40 buff. That gives the nice cloud of radiated particles around it and makes it heal. And presumably, maybe because it's tougher, we give it a little bit more when you harvest it, just to set it aside. And as simple as that, we've added 2 new creatures, a radiated direwolf and a radiated zombie dog. But we're not done. Let's look at a couple more things that we can put in. And this is the radiated glow direwolf. And what I call it glow? Well, it has that yellow glow. The changes should be pretty familiar if you look at the XML file. We've increased the health, the experience gain, and we put on the particle that are around it. We put in the buff 40. But we've also made another change. We've put in a property for replace material 0, and we put in a feral rad, and that's the yellow glowing that you see on other. And let's go back to the white, because that's where we've been taking it from. And you see it has the same thing. It's got the feral rad one, and that's sort of an extra, it's a change in the material that gives it that yellow glow. So let's go back to the direwolf. And these ones. So we're using that as well. And of course we're changing some of the things you get when you harvest, just like we did previously. So one thing to keep in mind when you're making these changes is that you can play around with all these properties. You can change around with the materials, etc. But it might or might not look the best. So you really have to try them out and see how they look. For instance, the feral rad looks okay on some, but it doesn't look good on everything. If you put it on a bear, for instance, it looks quite weird in my opinion. Maybe because it's stretched too much, or maybe the texture just doesn't fit the shape. But whatever it is, it just looks off. For the direwolf and the zombie dog, it looks okay, I think, so that's why I'm using it there. So to finish off this part, we do the same thing with the radiated glow zombie dog. We tweak the health, experience, apply the radiation particles, and set the feral rad glow as well. And of course, the radiated buff 40. Now with those done, assuming you didn't butcher the XML files, we should be able to load up the game to try out. But if you did butcher the XML files, you can always replace it with the original copy if you made a copy, or just verify integrity of game files to start over. Alright, we're now back in the game. Now, did it work? Well, if the game loads and there are no errors thrown in the console, and again you'll see that because it'll pop up and there'll be a lot of red lines here, then chances are that it did work. It's not 100%, but it's pretty close. At least nothing game breaking was introduced. So we're going to be in creative, and again you hit the console, hit CM to turn on and off, and you can go DM as well if you want to do debug menu. And we're going to see what we can access them. So we hit F6, and you'll see we now have an animal radiated direwolf. We have an animal radiated glow direwolf, a glow zombie dog, and a radiated zombie dog. So let's see if we can just spawn them. So let's spawn all 4 of them. And you see they're all here. And they're not moving. Well, there they're moving finally. So it worked. Not too bad, right? Now he decided to notice me. So you see they run around and they look pretty good. You see the one which just has the radiated cloud around it. And then you see the one that has the actual yellow glow. And it looks pretty good. I mean, if you're out at night, I think it looks quite good. So is that it? No, not quite. While now we have the beasts in the game, they only exist if you spawn them manually with the F6 command, for instance. So we need a way for the game to spawn them at other times automatically, else it gets somewhat pointless. So to get into that, let's exit the game again and look at another XML file. So we're now back in Windows and we're still in the config folder. And this is a file called entitygroups.xml. And this one has a lot of groups of mobs that the game uses for spawning, which is generally dictated under GameStages.xml, but that's for another guide. So let's open up the entitygroups.xml and we'll see I have an original one as well, just to make sure if I do something wrong, I can just replace it. So we're going to have a look here at the zombie dog group. So what happens is that when the game wants to spawn something from the zombie dog group, it will cross-reference this file and it'll see that, hey, it should be an animal zombie dog. So that's what it spawns. But we can actually change that. So to do that, we're going to be copying in a couple of lines. So let's bring over the Radiated Zombie Dog and the Glow Dog. So let's put this in here. And you see, I've basically done the same thing. I put in the entity, I'll put the name that we defined in entityclasses.xml that we just changed, and I put a probability of 0.1, which is basically 10%. I do the same thing for the animal Radiated Glow Zombie Dog, but I put the probability at 0.03. So basically 10% to get the Radiated Zombie Dog and 3% to get the glowing zombie dog, plus or minus. What happens now is that whenever the game wants to spawn a zombie dog group, it will look at all these three entries in this case. It will randomize and it'll pick one. But obviously, most of the time there's going to be a normal zombie dog. Sometimes, occasionally, 10% of the time, more or less, it's going to be the radiated one, and a few percent of the time it's going to be the glowing radiated one. So that basically is how the game chooses from an entity group. It basically randomizes among all the entities that make up the group. And we can do the same thing for the wolf group. So let me copy that here. So we have the wolf group that normally just has the wolf. And we're going to put in the radiated wolf and the radiated glow wolf. With those two quick changes, the game can now spawn our modded beast. However, it's only going to be as per the probabilities you put in. So what happens now if the game wants to spawn something from the wolf group, it's still more likely to be a normal wolf. Sometimes it's going to be the other ones. So that's really just up to the randomizer. So maybe we want to have these beasts at other times as well. Well, there are a host of other groups that you could include these animals in, and the basics is the same. A straightforward way to identify is simply to search for, say, let's do a search for zombie dog. And we'll start at the beginning here of the file. So we're going to start looking at zombie dog, and you can see the zombies night has one. And we could basically just copy in the same lines, and I can show that here. We could take the same copy that we had, copy that in, and change the probability. So maybe we don't want to have this one as 0.1, maybe we want to have it as 0.01, for instance, right? Or 0.05 to make it even less. And we could do the same thing for this one. Again, it's really up to how you want to do it. But it means that when there's a zombies night, all of a sudden it's going to potentially spawn in our new zombies, our new feral and glowing and radiated zombie dogs as well. And there's a lot of other of these ones. We have the Wasteland, which also has a zombie dog. We could put them in as well. It has Wasteland Night, etc., etc. So if you want them in Scout Hordes and the Blood Moon Hordes, you can just add appropriate lines. There's a lot of groups in here, so you could just add that in as and how you want to do it as far as the probability. You look at this, let's do a Blood Moon Horde here, or Feral Horde. And let's check this specifically one. They're formatted exactly the same thing, just it's out on the right as opposed to having line breaks. But you look at it, it's basically exactly the same thing. So you can just edit this one just like you want to do it. So it's very, very simple. So once you're done, you save it and you play the game. And at times the game will auto-spawn the modded beasts along with the other mobs as per the probabilities. So you will see them appear in your game at the appropriate times. So it's very simple. But hold on, you might say. You're in single player. How do I do this on a multiplayer server? That's a great question. And the answer is fortunately very simple. You've already done it, sort of. 7 Days to Die is built up such that single player and multiplayer is almost identical as far as the files. There are a couple of minor changes, but generally it's pretty much the same. So if you make these changes in your game, you can run in single players. It'll work. If you run your game and start a multiplayer game in the normal client and invite your friends, the server will take these exact same files as they do in single players, so it already works. If you run a dedicated server, either on your PC or on a hosted provider, you only need to edit the exact same files on the dedicated server. It's the same values and everything, and it will work exactly the same. Each client connecting will be using the XML files off the server, so it's only the server files that you need to be updating. In fact, you can actually take these files that we've actually changed here and you can just copy them over to a dedicated installation and it will be working fine. As always, whenever you're modding or making changes to these game files, remember, take a backup of your world. While simple modding shouldn't cause issues, it is still possible to make mistakes and you can cause issues in existing worlds. You can have corruption if something really goes wrong. So having a backup just saves you the headache should something really go wrong. And as mentioned before, if the client files are messed up, verify integrity of game files and you'll get back a pristine version of the game. Modding looks a lot more complicated than it really is. Take it step by step and you'll be able to make these changes without much issues, I'm very sure of that. For added homework, try adding a radiated regular wolf to your game files. Add it in the entity classes and add it in the entity groups and see if you can get it to show up in your game. I hope you've enjoyed this basic modded beast guide and good luck in your future modding. If you have any ideas or you want something specifically, just let me know in the comment section below. And if you find this video useful, leave a like, subscribe because that really does help me out. And I also urge you to have a look at Jerva's testing videos that I'm going to be linking in the description below. Give him a like to show appreciation for his continued modding work. Have a great one.